Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Impact Solutions podcast. I'm here with John Mark, and we're really excited to talk to you today about developing measurable goals and objectives. So this is part 2 of our current series. We recently recorded and released part 1, which is on theory of change and an associated logic model. So definitely go back and listen to that if you haven't already. You can find both of these recordings on YouTube. On YouTube, we have associated slides and visuals that might be helpful for some of you. On the podcast, obviously, it's just the audio, and that might be easier for you to listen on a jog or while you're driving. But definitely cross-reference both channels if you want the audio components when that makes more sense, or the visuals if you learn better that way. So this series is really a recap of a recent webinar that we did. And we talked about theory of change and measurable goals and objectives and how to capture and report ongoing impact data in a recent webinar. We had great engagement, great feedback, and we just wanted to dive into each of these topics on their own a little bit more, as each of them are critically important for nonprofits at any point in time, but especially right now when grants and federal funding are more of a concern for a lot of organizations. These components are even more critically important when funding becomes more competitive. So they're always important no matter what. But when funding is more scarce, when it's more competitive, having a theory of change, having measurable goals and objectives, and consistently measuring reliable impact data is really, really important. So stay tuned for part 3 of this series, where we'll talk more about the ongoing impact measurement. And then later this spring, we're going to do a second series that's more on the impact communication side of things. So we're really excited to be here with you today. John Mark, would you like to kick us off with this next slide?
Absolutely. So thanks for sharing all that, Lauren. So like we said in part 1, you really want to begin with your theory of change, but also with your logic model. And so if you haven't seen that, please go back and watch that episode where we talk about how to break down the impact that your nonprofit wants to create. Now, assuming you have done that, what Lauren talked about in the previous episode is you want to then move on to goals and objectives. The first thing you want to do is make sure that your goals and objectives are aligned with your theory of change, that they are created and revised based on your logic model, and that you follow the SMART goal framework, meaning they must be measurable. This is not a place for any kind of fluff. We are not about any kind of fluff when it comes to impact measurement, when it comes to marketing, fundraising, anything. Everything needs to be measurable, needs to be specific, and it needs to be very easy for anyone to understand. And so when we talk about this, remember, we're trying to create very meaningful change through your nonprofit programs. That's what you want to do. And the more clear and articulate that we can be and measurable, more specific, the better. And one of the best things that you can do is steal frameworks that absolutely work, right? So we're going to talk about a SMART goal framework that you can choose. But probably before we go into that, Lauren, don't you think it'd be a good idea to define what a SMART goal is?
Yes, absolutely. I think that many people have heard of SMART goals and some probably have not, and that's completely fine. For me personally, when I hear SMART goals, I almost instantly go to more of a healthcare and nutrition thought, but they're used across many or any industries.
Right.
So SMART goals are often developed one-on-one with dietitians or other healthcare providers to help their patients or their clients to develop, personalized goals. But SMART goals can be used in really any setting, and they're fantastic. The acronym SMART just stands for S is for specific, M is for measurable, the A is for achievable, R is for realistic or relevant, and then T is for time bound. And so each of these components is very important. We actually see a lot of granting organizations and other funders that require nonprofits to create SMART goals and SMART objectives. And they have to submit that as part of their RFP or various points throughout the grant application process or the grant reporting process. So if they're
Right.
submitting on a quarterly or annual basis to the funder, these are our results. They're having to refer back to those goals and objectives and how they actually met them. So that is a quick breakdown of SMART goals and how each component can be really helpful in making your goals and objectives attainable and measurable.
Perfect. I think that's very well said. And so if we are going to build out our SMART goals, you want to follow everything that Lauren just said from SMART. But then it's also helpful just to put them into a sentence, right? And that's the framework that we were talking about. And so for those of you who are listening, this is a little bit more challenging than those who are watching on YouTube. But just think of this like ad libs or mad libs, whatever the game's called. So it's who will do what, resulting in measure by when. I'm going to say that one more time for those of you who are listening. Who will do what, resulting in measure by when. And so we made up a situation that you guys can just use as an example. Who is organization ABC? It's a nonprofit organization ABC. What? Build 125 new homes in North Tulsa. Measure 15% decrease in homelessness. When? December 31st, 2025. So what's fantastic about this framework is you can take these big, smart goals and put it into one simple sentence that anyone can understand. And when we put this application together, it looks like Organization ABC will build 125 new homes in North Tulsa, resulting in a 15% decrease in homelessness by December 31st, 2025. No one's confused. And that's the goal, right? No one's confused. Everyone understands what we're trying to do, when it's due, like what the deadline is, and what kind of a difference it's going to create in the community. Lauren, is there anything you want to say about this framework?
Yeah, I think that the SMART goal framework and then the associated example that you have here, who will do what, resulting in measure by when. These are very common. I'm very big on giving credit where credit is due and citations and references. So we did not come up with these. These are very common.
Right.
I would be surprised if a lot of listeners haven't seen this already. So these are well-founded, well-used, and very well accepted frameworks and tools for you to use. Again, not just if you're applying for grants, but if you're talking to individual funders about a program and trying to help them understand why they should give and what difference you're creating in your community. Or if you're going to use them internally, trying to get multiple team members on the same page or get your team excited about here's the change that we are aiming to make by the end of the year. Here's the change we made last year, and here's how we're going to grow and expand on that. So this is a really helpful way to help any stakeholder, not just donors, but employees, board members, volunteers, corporate partners, again, policy holders, others within your community that you might be looking to partner with. It's a great way to get people on the same page and to quickly clarify, this is what we stand for, this is what we do, and this is the change we're trying to create. And a lot of people will connect with that very quickly and say, oh, well, I care a lot about homelessness in my local community, and I want to be a part of creating that change. So SMART goals can be used widely, not just for grant reporting, but can be used as a great way to communicate more clearly and to set targets that help your team determine, okay, are we actually hitting our impact goals? And what are we even, needing to measure here?
Right. You're bringing up great points. And just think about, when you get everyone around the table and you're setting these SMART goals, or, you're working with an outside team like ours who comes in and presents these SMART goals to you. Someone on your team, whether it's ops or finance, is going to say 125 new homes. Whoa, we only did 50 last year, right? And they're going to be, that's a huge jump. And so they're going to be looking at that. Hey, do we have the funding for that? Hey, do we have the ability to pull that off? Hey, what's it going to cost to do 125 new homes? How many properties do we need to source? What kind of relationships do we need to extend with the city? So you're going to see all of these logistical things that unfold, right? It's really fun to put goals out on paper, say, hey, I'm going to go run a marathon and not train, right? That's a very different thing. But when you have people that put this goal together and you have your whole team come around with all their different skill sets, with the different ways that they look at the world, they're going to be like, whoa, 125. How did we choose that and why? Oh, it's a 15% reduction in homelessness in this area. Okay, that's awesome. But do we have the funding for it? Do we have the capacity for it? What will we need from a project management standpoint? What will we need from a insert whatever standpoint? That's why SMART goals are so helpful, because it brings different people to the table who are going to address this very differently. Something that's very common is that you'll see leadership set these huge goals, which we love. These are wonderful things. We love setting big goals. But then the team that's going to go execute isn't on board, or they think something's off, but there's no discussion after that. That's just a major point of contention that can be avoided, right? That's not an unavoidable thing. That is something that you absolutely can avoid by getting everyone around the table together so that ownership of the goal can be taken. Because it's a lot easier for a leader. Like, so let's say Lauren just set this big goal, but then the rest of the team's like, I don't see how it's possible that we could do that. And Lauren would not do that. But it's just the kind of thing where the rest of the team is going to feel extremely burdened or empowered by these SMART goals. And we definitely want to go down the path of empowerment, but we definitely want to challenge as well and push the boundaries on what we can accomplish from an impact standpoint.
Definitely. And I think we also see a lot of organizations that just create goals that genuinely it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's not only that it isn't measurable, but it's not even something that is meaningful. It's not something that can
Right.
really be applied. And so as a third party evaluator or other people within their organization might read these things and just say, I don't know, I'm not sure what you mean or what you're going for. And so just really not leaving room for it to an open interpretation.
Right.
So being as specific, as clear as possible, so that if the person that set those goals on your team, if they leave for whatever reason, if they find another job, if, this is very normal, the rest of your team can continue to meet these goals.
Right.
And it's not a question of, well, what were we going for or how are we going to meet that? So yeah, I think that's another reason that we feel the need to discuss SMART goals and SMART objectives, is because we very often see that there are either no goals and objectives in place, or they're just there because, well, you should have them, so we created these, and it's flowery language. It's not something that is really tangible or implementable.
Right.
And so that can be problematic as well.
Very well put. Very, very well put. So this is a similar framework. It's the same concept, but it's just changing up the order a little bit. So for everyone who's listening, this is a different way of saying the exact same thing that we did in that previous framework. And so in this situation, we're looking at by when, who will do what, resulting in measure. So all you can see is we just changed the order here. But we're using a different example. We have the the when here is March 31st, 2026. The organization is also Organization ABC, but this is obviously a different use case. What will they do? They're going to triple the reach of its diabetes prevention program, with the measure being decrease obesity by 25% amongst our patient population. Okay, that sounds awesome. Let's put it all together. By March 31st, 2026, Organization ABC will triple the reach of its diabetes prevention program, resulting in a 25% reduction in obesity among our patient population. There's a lot of things I like about this goal. One, it's important to acknowledge that these are aspirational goals. Like, these are what we are seeking to do. This is what we want to accomplish in the future. That's why it's a goal. And so thinking about it in that regard, we're looking at a couple of different things that are important to see here. Triple the reach of its program, it's the diabetes prevention program, resulting in a 25% reduction in obesity. Lauren, what do you want to shine light on? Because you've actually worked with several obesity prevention programs. What do you want to shine light on that's very important to look at with regard to tripling the reach, which is more of like a constituent marketing problem, right? That's being solved. but that results in this wonderful outcome of a reduction in obesity amongst the patient population.
Yeah, I think that it can be sort of a marketing, creating awareness of the program. But I think for others that I've worked with, they actually have a patient or participant backlog. They just don't have they don't have the staff, they don't have the funding, they may not have the facility space to see more people or to get more people in their program. And so I think it can be both. Best case scenario, you have the demand is there. And when the demand is there, I think that helps funders and other stakeholders see, okay, this is, people want this. People want to be a part of your program. They want to create change. They want to be healthier. They want to reduce their glucose levels, their insulin use. When you have that backlog of patients or participants, that alone is a strong case for support. When you're having a hard time getting enough people into your program, that is sometimes that is a marketing or communication problem, or an awareness problem. But sometimes it might be that your program is not offered on a good day or at a good time for people. There might be logistical hangups. There might be misunderstandings about what your program is for or what your program is going to do. So yeah, another very important piece of your SMART goals and helping you understand, again, not just how are you going to communicate your goals and your impact metrics to donors and external stakeholders, but also how are you going to review this information internally in order to improve and learn and grow and expand from a programmatic standpoint.
I think that's so well said. And I'm going to be the bad person here, the bad guy. Another reason why you might not be able to fill your programs because people don't want it. That's something that happens all of the time. And it's important to know that happens all of the time. This is why businesses go out of business. It's because no one wants their product, because it's solving a problem that no one's interested in. And so it's also important to ask the question, do people actually want this service that we're trying to offer? You may have gone many years without conducting a needs assessment. Needs assessments are not like super convenient, right? They're not a convenient thing to do. They're just a really important thing to do. Like if you think about if Nike only ever came out with version 1 of their shoes and never created a new shoe ever again, people would stop buying Nike shoes. The same thing happens inside of nonprofit programs. They have to evolve over time, right? There's going to be a time where they're really, really great and then start to dwindle down a little bit more, and they might need to innovate. That is what is so important about capturing and collecting impact data, setting these measurable goals. And if you're not hitting them, just being bold enough to ask why. We've seen this happen where organizations expand rapidly only to find out that people aren't interested in what they have, that their impact model was not appropriate, that their service model, no one was interested in it, or very, very few people were interested in it. And so that's why you want to test, iterate, and improve. That's why you want to go through those kinds of methodologies, and it's super helpful.
Right. And we also have gotten a lot of feedback, I would say just in the past 2 to 4 weeks, from quite a few nonprofit leaders that we've talked to that mention how difficult it is to create measurable goals and objectives. And from our perspective, helping lots of different types of organizations create and implement and measure measurable goals and objectives or SMART goals and objectives, creating the measurable goals and objectives on the front end truly shouldn't be difficult. It really shouldn't be hard to say, what do we want to measure? What do we need to measure? I understand that sometimes you might feel like you're coming up with too many goals and objectives, and it might be hard to narrow it down and narrow the focus. But again, that's why if you haven't listened to part 1 of this series, go back to that and listen to the theory of change and logic model episode, and start with that logic model. Get a cohesive, it's okay if it's still in process, but a working logic model that's pretty well underway. Then develop your goals and objectives and then go back to that narrative paragraph version of a theory of change after you have some measurable goals and objectives. And they should all work together. They should all be very cohesive. The theory of change should be more big picture, long term. The logic model is breaking things down, looking at inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and long term impacts, and how we're actually going to do this on a monthly, quarterly, annual, and 5-year basis. And then your SMART goals and objectives are saying, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to hit this target,
Right.
by the end of Q1, or by the end of year 1, or by the end of year 3. So they should all be very cohesive, and developing these measurable goals and objectives on the front end shouldn't be challenging.
Yeah.
I understand it takes time, it takes thought, it takes getting multiple team members to collaborate and be on the same page. But just because you're measuring a reduction in something versus an increase in something doesn't mean that that should make your goals difficult to create.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Or, I understand that hitting your targets might be more challenging if COVID hits, or if funding is cut, and, things change and evolve after you set those goals and objectives. But being able to create them on the front end should not be the hard part.
Completely agree. Completely agree. It's just best to get started, right? It's best to absolutely get started and see what you're working with. But you do have to look at it from different angles. You've got to look at it from a finance angle, from an operations angle, from all of the, obviously your program angle as well. Be able to say, okay, if we're going to be able to expand, with that last example that Lauren just shared, if we have to increase capacity by 3x, that might mean making 5 hires, right? Might mean 50 hires, might mean whatever the number is. And you have to ask the question, do we have the funding for it? Or can we get the funding for it? And so these are not easy things to execute, right? The program is not easy to execute, but the planning is very executable. It's very doable. And I think it's important just to understand that there are just very different, there are a lot of different reasons as to why you would want to measure your impact, why you would want to set measurable goals and objectives. And the most obvious one is that it's the number one reason why funders give, right? It is why donors give to nonprofits. It's why grantors grant money to nonprofits. It allows you to set targets for your team, to measure progress, and then report on that data. Now, the reason why we do it, the thing that we care about most, are the people or cause that you serve, right? We are all about measuring impact so that you can create a greater impact. We absolutely believe in the idea of what gets measured gets managed. And so the more we're measuring social impact, the more social impact we are likely to create as a nonprofit. So that's what we're crazy about. But we're absolutely, we absolutely understand that you have to report on this in a way that is meaningful and digestible for funders to give substantially more money to your nonprofit. And so it's really hard to create impact without money. We get that. And so that's why we really want to look at this from the standpoint of how do you measure and communicate, or measure and market your impact, so you can actually take the nonprofit to the next level.
Absolutely. So I think we've covered a lot of great information here today, that, just based on feedback we've received recently, should be very practical, timely, and implementable for a lot of different types of nonprofit organizations and nonprofit leaders. So we really appreciate everyone listening today. Would love your feedback. If you are on YouTube watching this, any comments, whether that's feedback or questions, would be very greatly appreciated. And if you would like to learn more, definitely take our fundraising quiz. You can scan the QR code here on the screen, or if you're listening on the podcast, you can go to fundraisingquiz.org and take our fundraising quiz to learn more about where you and your organization are at from a fundraising and communication perspective, but definitely related to impact measurement. So again, we greatly appreciate everyone listening today, and stay tuned for part 3 of our impact measurement series.